like a native.
Glad to be here.
So picture this. You're at a party, right? The music is playing, you got a drink in your hand, and a colleague walks up to you.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, and they smile and ask this really seemingly innocent question like, so what are your plans for the weekend? And suddenly, your brain, which you know for a fact holds thousands of English words, completely flatlines.
It totally just shuts down.
Exactly. The silence stretches out, and you panic. But listen, by the end of our conversation today, you are going to know exactly how to stop that freeze. You'll learn how to stop translating in your head and instead answer instantly and confidently.
Because the reality of speaking natural, flowing English is, well, it's widely misunderstood. It is not about using complicated vocabulary or, mastering advanced grammar rules on the spot. It's actually about using simple, ready-made sentence structures, what we call frames, at the exact right moment.
Instead of building every single sentence from absolute zero, these frames give your thoughts an instant, reliable shape. If you want to keep your English conversations alive, you need to give them CPR.
CPR, I love that. Let's break that down. It's 3 steps. C is choose a frame. P, plug in your details. And R, return the question.
Choose, plug in, return.
Exactly. Choose, plug in, return. That's what keeps the conversation alive.
We're going to walk you through the exact frames that native speakers rely on every single day and show you how to make them completely automatic. But before we get to the frames themselves, I want to linger on that party scenario for a second.
Sure.
Why does that freeze happen? I mean, it is the most frustrating part of learning a language. You know the grammar, you ace the written test, but someone says, "How are you?" and your brain just shuts off.
Well, let's look at the mechanics of what is actually happening in your head when you freeze, because it is absolutely not a lack of intelligence or, a lack of vocabulary. It's just a working memory overload. Real live conversation moved incredibly fast. You're processing what the other person said, you're interpreting their tone, figuring out your own opinion.
Searching for the English translation.
Yes. Choosing a grammatical structure and worrying about your pronunciation.
That's like, what, 6 massive cognitive tasks happening in milliseconds?
Precisely. In a written test, you have 10 minutes to sit with a notebook and design a textbook-perfect sentence. Your prefrontal cortex has time to organize the data.
But in a hallway chat, you have maybe 1 second.
Right. You're demanding perfection from a brain that is actively being overwhelmed.
You know, it makes me think of cooking.
Oh, how so?
Trying to build a perfect English sentence from scratch during a really fast-paced conversation. It's like having a kitchen full of raw ingredients but absolutely no recipe when a guest walks in and says they are starving right now.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
You can't just start, like, chopping onions, making a stock from scratch, and reducing a sauce for 3 hours.
No, the cognitive pressure of cooking from scratch in that moment is just immense. If you try to manage the grammar, the vocabulary, the syntax, and the social dynamics simultaneously, your brain just overloads and shuts down the operation.
You need a meal ready to serve.
Exactly. Which brings us to the solution: answer frames. If demanding perfection and starting from zero are the enemies, frames are the meal prep.
Okay, so what exactly is a frame then?
A frame is simply a reusable sentence pattern. It provides the shape of your answer before you even fill in the details.
Right.
Instead of creating the architectural blueprint for every single sentence you speak, you start with a ready-made structure. Then you just slot your specific idea into it.
Okay, wait, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Isn't this just memorizing a phrase book? Because that sounds a bit like the tourist who memorizes, where's the train station and I would like a coffee. Does that actually build fluency, or is it just parroting?
That is the most common pushback, for sure, and it's an important distinction to make. No, it's not a script. A phrase book gives you the entire sentence fixed, rigid, and inflexible.
Like it only works in one exact scenario.
Exactly. If the situation changes slightly, the phrase book fails. A frame, on the other hand, is a structural foundation.
Oh, I see. So it's the skeleton, not the whole body.
Yes. You internalize the shape, but the content is entirely yours. So instead of memorizing the rigid sentence, I think learning English is useful because it helps me travel. You internalize the underlying frame.
Which would be what?
I think blank is blank because blank.
Ah. So I'm essentially offloading the heavy lifting of the sentence structure to my muscle memory.
That is the cognitive trick right there. You no longer have to invent the structure on the fly. I think it's blank because bronze is locked in. Your prefrontal cortex doesn't have to spend any energy on grammar at all.
It only has to find the specific vocabulary word for your personal reason.
Exactly. This reduces the pressure massively, it brings order to your answer, and frankly, it mimics how native speakers actually talk.
We definitely do. Learners often have this illusion that native speakers are constantly inventing these brilliant, unique grammatical structures on the fly.
Right, but we really aren't.
We lean heavily on the exact same structural patterns over and over again. Natural English isn't always complicated English.
Far from it. Very often, natural English is just simple English deployed at the right moment.
So let's look at those moments. What are the most common conversational triggers where we need these frames?
Well, the most frequent ones revolve around sharing what you think and what you like, opinions and preferences. Let's start with opinions.
Okay.
When someone asks, "What do you think about the new policy?" the instinct for a learner is to try to deliver this like comprehensive, nuanced thesis statement.
Right, they want to sound smart, so they try to build a massive paragraph in their head before they even open their mouth.
And that causes the freeze. You do not need to do that. Start simple. You use a frame to just get the wheels turning.
Give me some examples.
Phrases like, "I think," I'd say, "to be honest, I think," "the way I see it," or simply, "for me."
Getting those first 2 or 3 words out is like breaking a seal. Once you say, "for me," the rest of the sentence naturally follows.
The initiation is the hardest part. Once you say, "the way I see it," your brain is already moving. "The way I see it, it's a good idea." To be honest, I think it depends on the situation. Notice that these are short,
Very short.
because in spoken language, clarity beats complexity every time.
And you can easily build on that to sound more sophisticated without making it harder, right?
Totally.
You make it a 2-part answer by just tacking on a reason. I think blank because blank. Clean, simple, done. I think it's a good idea because it saves time.
That two-part structure is the absolute workhorse of English conversation. But we also need to address situations where a direct opinion is risky. This is where soft opinion frames come in.
Soft opinions. Like when you need to disagree with your boss without getting fired.
Exactly that. If you're in a meeting and you think a plan is terrible, saying, "I think you are wrong," is grammatically perfect but socially disastrous.
Yeah, they won't go over well.
No. You need softer language to protect the relationship. Frames like, "I'm not sure, but I think," or "I might be wrong, but..."
Or the classic, I can see your point, but.
Yes, that makes sense, but... Why do we use these? It's not a lack of confidence, it's strategic politeness. It demonstrates that you've considered their side before introducing your own.
They act like social shock absorbers.
I love that phrase.
Yeah, they allow you to hit a bump of disagreement without crashing the conversational car. You just glide right over the tension. That makes sense, but I'm not sure will work for our team. It's incredibly smooth.
Social shock absorbers is a fantastic way to conceptualize it, and that leads directly into our next daily trigger preference frames. People are constantly asking what you prefer: food, movies, work habits, routines.
And just saying, I like pizza, makes you feel kind of like a toddler. So how do we frame preferences more naturally?
You swap out "I like" for frames such as "I prefer," "I'm really into," "I'm not a big fan of," or "I usually go for." But to sound truly natural, you use a specific 3-part formula:
Okay, what is it?
your choice, your reason, and a small extra detail.
Choice, reason, extra detail. Give me an example of how that flows.
Let's use the frame. "I prefer blank because blank. Also blank." If someone asks about your daily routine, you don't just say, "I like mornings."
Right.
You say, "I prefer learning in the morning because I can focus better. Also, it helps me start the day on a positive note."
Let me try one for food. Let's use, I'm not a big fan of. Okay. I'm not a big fan of spicy food because it upsets my stomach. Also, I generally prefer milder, savory flavors. Wow, it feels really complete.
It does. It gives your answer a robust conversational weight without rambling.
Okay, opinions and preferences are great.
Yeah.
But honestly, the area where my brain short-circuits the most in a second language isn't opinions, it's time.
Time travel.
Yes. Whenever someone asks me what I'm doing next weekend or what I did last summer, I just hit a wall. Navigating time feels like a grammatical minefield.
Plans and experiences. This is a huge source of anxiety for learners. Let's tackle future plans first. The paralysis usually comes from the grammar rules. People agonize over whether to use will, going to, or the present continuous.
Oh, absolutely. Deciding between I will go, I am going to go, and I am going in a split second is terrifying.
Well, here's the secret. Native speakers are not running grammar algorithms in their heads.
No.
No. They use frames to demonstrate their level of certainty. If you are 100% certain, you use I'm going to. If you are organized, but it's just a plan, I'm planning to. If you're optimistic, but it's out of your hands, I'm hoping to.
And if it's just a possibility, I might, or I'm thinking about.
Yes. These frames bypass the grammar rules entirely and let you express your intention, and you can expand them using a sequence frame. I'm planning to blank because blank. After that, blank.
Let's test that. I'm planning to study for an hour because I have a certification exam coming up. After that, I'll probably just watch some TV. It paints a whole narrative of my evening.
It structures the time for the listener perfectly. Now look at the past. Experiences. Someone asks, have you ever been to Tokyo? Or what did you do over the weekend? Again, panic sets in.
Because learners try to perfectly conjugate the past perfect tense while simultaneously building this entertaining story.
Exactly. So we bypass the grammar panic again.
How do we frame a past experience then?
For a quick answer, you can use I've tried it once or I went there last year. But if the conversation calls for a bit more, you use the three-part small story structure. When, what happened, and how you felt.
When, what happened, how you felt. Okay. I visited Nairobi last year. We went on a safari, and it was absolutely thrilling to see the animals up close.
That's perfect. Or I gave a presentation to the board last week. My slides wouldn't load at first, but I felt incredibly relieved when I got through it.
I do have to ask, though, when someone says casually, how was your weekend? Do they really want a three-part narrative arc? Isn't that overkill?
It's a fair question. But the genius of the small story structure is that it provides just enough detail to be engaging without turning into a hostage situation.
Right. You're not trapping them.
No, humans are wired for narrative. A tiny arc setting the scene, the action, the emotional payoff is deeply satisfying to listen to. It's infinitely better than a one-word answer like, good.
That makes total sense. We crave that human element. But what happens when you genuinely don't have a story? Like, the conversation stalls, someone asks, what have you been up to lately? And my honest answer is that I have done nothing but sit on my couch.
There is a frame for that too. We call it the not much frame.
Right.
I think we need to validate a very real fear learners have. They think every English answer must be fascinating.
Right.
It doesn't. Real life is often mundane. If you are just working and sleeping, it is perfectly fine to say that.
Not much, just working and relaxing. Or not much, just trying to catch up on a few chores.
Right. You don't have to invent a safari in Nairobi to have a valid conversation. But, and this is a massive but, you cannot just stop there.
This is the R in our CPR mnemonic from the beginning. Return the question.
Yes. This is where most conversations die. A learner answers a question, feels relieved they survived the grammar, and then goes completely silent.
Which forces the other person to constantly drive the interaction. It feels like an interrogation.
Exactly. If you add, what about you, or how about you, you instantly balance the dynamic.
It passes the conversational ball back. Not much. Just working and relaxing. What about you? It creates a rhythm.
It shows curiosity and warmth, and honestly, you should staple it to almost everything. I think the new software is confusing. What do you think? Or, I haven't been to that restaurant yet. Have you? It's a superpower for fluency.
Okay, let's tackle the ultimate nightmare scenario. You don't need a frame for an opinion or a plan because you literally didn't understand the question. The person spoke way too fast or used a weird idiom and you were just staring at them blankly.
Clarification frames. This requires a mindset shift, though. In any language, even your native one, you will occasionally miss things. The goal of conversation isn't 100% perfect comprehension. The goal is managing the interaction calmly. Instead of freezing in shame, take control.
Let's dig into that shame for a second, actually. Why do learners feel so incredibly embarrassed about asking someone to just repeat themselves?
Well, I think it's because they equate misunderstanding with failing. They feel it reveals their incompetence in the language. But from a sociolinguistic perspective, asking for clarification is actually a demonstration of competence.
Wait, really? How so?
Because it shows you are actively engaged. You're managing the flow of information.
Okay, so how do we take control gracefully without feeling awkward?
By using frames like, sorry, what do you mean by it? Or, could you say that again? Or, to sound incredibly advanced, you paraphrase, just to check, are you saying?
Oh, I like that. Just to check, are you saying the deadline moved to Friday? It shows you grasp most of it, but you're just calibrating the details.
Exactly. It puts you entirely in the driver's seat. And adjacent to clarification are waiting frames.
Waiting frames.
Sometimes you understood the question perfectly, but your brain just needs a few seconds to retrieve the vocabulary. Silence feels awkward, so you panic.
So what do you say instead of just standing there like a statue?
You vocalize the pause. Let me think. That's a good question. I'm not really sure. Give me a second.
See, this is a massive revelation. Learners often think that hesitating means their English is bad. But saying, "That's a good question," is a high-level native speaker habit. Native speakers stall for time constantly.
We do it all day long. It signals to the listener, I heard you. I am formulating a response. Please hold the floor for me.
It's conversational camouflage. You sound incredibly natural while secretly buying your brain an extra 3 seconds to choose your frame and plug in your details.
Conversational camouflage is exactly what it is.
All right, so we built this incredible toolkit. We have frames for opinions, shock absorbers for disagreement, preferences, time travel, stalling, and CPR to keep it alive.
It's a lot of tools.
It is. But knowing them and using them are two entirely different things.
Yeah.
If a listener tries to memorize a spreadsheet of these right now, they're going to drown. What is the actual action plan here?
Well, the worst thing you can do is try to memorize hundreds of full, completed sentences. That defeats the entire purpose of offloading cognitive weight.
Right.
The strategy is to memorize one frame and change the details 5 times.
Okay, walk me through what that practice actually looks like.
Let's take the plan frame. I'm planning to blank because blank. You sit in your room and you just plug different vocabulary into that static structure. I'm planning to study tonight because I have free time. I'm planning to call my friend because we haven't talked recently.
I'm planning to exercise because I need to move. I'm planning to cook because I'm hungry.
Exactly. You are carving a groove into your brain so the structure becomes automatic regardless of the topic.
That makes a lot of sense.
And to truly cement it under pressure, we use the 3-second speaking drill. You ask yourself a simple question and you force yourself to begin your answer within 3 seconds.
Wait, 3 seconds. That feels incredibly aggressive. Doesn't that just induce the exact panic we are trying to cure?
It sounds counterintuitive, I know, but it's essentially exposure therapy. The reason you panic in real life is because the pressure is unexpected. By simulating the time pressure in a safe environment, you train your brain to snap to a frame immediately.
Okay, let's actually do this right now. Ask me something.
Okay. What do you think about working from home?
1, 2. I think it's great because I save time on commuting. Also, I get to wear sweatpants.
There you go. Notice how you stumbled for a microsecond on, I think it's the last, but the frame caught you like a safety net.
Yeah, I felt the pressure, but knowing the structure meant I didn't completely derail. You're prioritizing speed over perfection.
Entirely. The goal is momentum. Many learners wait in silence until they have a flawless sentence constructed in their mind before they open their mouths.
And that kills the conversation.
Exactly. Fluency does not mean you never make grammatical mistakes. Fluency means you can keep going.
I think that is the most relieving thing a language learner can hear. You don't have to sound like a textbook. You just need clear, flexible structures to keep the ball bouncing back and forth.
Yeah.
And you only need a handful to get started. Just pick 4 frames this week, maybe. I think blank because I prefer blank because I'm planning to and I've tried it and...
Honestly, those 4 alone will cover an enormous percentage of your daily interactions. Practice them with friends, use them in voice notes to yourself, and the translation reflex will start to fade.
You'll stop building from scratch and start speaking in organized, ready-made chunks.
Exactly.
It shifts the whole emotional landscape of speaking. It stops feeling like a high-stakes exam where you're being judged on your grammar and starts feeling like you just have a reliable tool belt strapped to your waist.
Yeah.
You are no longer standing in that kitchen with raw ingredients and a starving guest.
You have the meal prepped?
You have the meal prepped, the structure is ready, you just get to enjoy the conversation. So as you head out into the world today,